Alrighty, so I wanted to go ahead and do my reflection video. I know it's late, but want to answer these questions. How effective would you rate your initial planning of the unit? Well, as I mentioned before, this is a unit. What we've done is a unit that we've already planned out. I feel that I think that on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably say a 7, and that's kind of low. Someone will say 10, but I say a 7 because this is me planning out a unit by myself. So I've taken things that uh, I've done in the past with other PLCs that I've been a part of. I'm really big on um, doing unit plans or making any kind of plans with a team. I guess that's the coaching in me. That's the last 3 years of teaching, 4 years of teaching that I've had. I've always planned out units as a team. So I would say it was a 7 because again, it's me by myself. It's me having to break down the standards by myself, and I'm not necessarily having too much help, but it does help that I've been doing it for the last 3 years. Um, what led to revisions of my lesson plan, unit plan? Well, after looking at feedback from Taylor and even some of my classmates and talking to some of my colleagues at work, um, going a little bit more in detail and also trying to revise the just in case or the what if moments that you may have in your classrooms. Anybody can have a great lesson plan. It looks perfect on paper, but you always got to put in those just in case moments, those what if this happens, what if it's weather, what if you have a class full of kids with IEPs, what if you have kids that's supposed to be in AP classes that took on level classes, how are you going to adjust, how are you going to accommodate, how are you going to um, uh, have in your lesson plan a plan for those kids that may be ahead or that may be behind. How are you going to make your lesson plan understandable if you have a sub, and how can they pick it up and try to move forward? Or what if an administrator wants to come in and teach your class and give you a day to where you could work on paperwork? So, um, those are some of the things that led to some revisions that I thought of, and also, that I got back some feedback. Um, Insight you gain from the lesson planning process. Again, having been able to do lesson plans the last 3 years, I love the fact that I'd rather have it in a team setting versus an individual. Um, I think lesson planning helps you understand what you're trying to teach. That's one thing I think lesson planning, an insight I got from lesson planning, and because especially for your new teachers, it's great. It is great to sit down, look at standards, and plan out something that you're going to teach, a lesson that you're going to teach, and trying to stay on track with that lesson, and then going back, looking at your lesson plan or your unit plan, and say, all right, today I didn't get here, or yesterday I didn't get there. I think it's important to gain from lesson planning, again, those moments, those what if moments, those I didn't get to this, what's next, and also understanding the standard and what you're trying to teach. And with I was teaching the lesson, when I was teaching the lesson, again, it's something I've done, so I don't feel that I really gained much from it, but I do think, it's just like I relate everything to athletics. I come to practice, I plan out practice, what I'm going to do. I script my plays, I do my plays. Okay, something happened, I make adjustments on the fly, and then I go back and look at my lesson plan and how can I adjust for the future. Um, so it's great to come up with a plan, with a script, go with it, go through it as you're teaching it. And then when the bell rings, with that 5 minutes of transition or doing your planning or lunch period, you say, all right, here's some adjustments I can make, and I can make those adjustments easier. And I think that's one thing I picked up from planning the lesson. Um, what parts of the unit plan has emerged as critical to its implementation? I would say the assessments. I think those are, honestly, in my opinion, those are the most critical things. I guess it all depends on the subject, the assessments, because I know for physics, you want to make sure you have something in place that shows the kids that will allow the kids to show what they know. So I guess I would say assessments, but I would probably say planning out the assignments and the activities so that the students can get to the assessments. So that's probably what's really critical when it comes to creating a unit plan, um, and probably go ahead to assist with that. Um, like I said, I'm not a fan personally of backwards mapping because it's hard to, in my opinion, say, hey, look, this is the end goal, and let's figure out what we're going to do to get there when it comes to education. I know I want 80% mastery, but what if I have students that can't do basic math functions, they can't graph, or they don't have those skills and abilities yet? That really can affect how I get there. So when it comes to lesson planning, again, I relate to athletics. I prefer a week to week basis. I know I want to. I know I want my students to know how to graph. So instead of me saying coming in the classroom with an assumption, because that's what I think happens when you backwards map. You have an assumption of prior knowledge that the students have, but then when you realize they don't have it, you make major adjustments to your lesson plan, and then it affects the whole thing. That is evidence because that happened to us this year or last semester at my school, where we backwards planned, and then once we started teaching the lesson, it was evident that the majority of our students had zero prior knowledge. So now we have to reteach things that in years before this year that we taught because we knew coming in, hey, we may have students that don't do this, so let's teach it like this well before we even start a unit. So that's my view on backwards planning. Again, relating to athletics, I want to win a state championship. So I'm not going to prepare for the week before the state championship because we're not there yet. It's a learning curve. You have to learn your team. You have to learn your students. And again, this is my opinion. Learn as you go. That's what they say is good teaching practice. Learn with your students. So it's the same thing. Learn what my students can do as I go and make those major or minor adjustments to reach the end goal of, hey, I want to reach 80% mastery. But I don't want to do it where, hey, let's get 80% mastery on a test we haven't even taught yet so the kids can get to the test. I'm not a teach to the test teacher. I think that's wrong. Now we're not teaching for them to learn. We teaching kids to memorize. That's how I feel about it. Um, how did the planning process help me determine how I would know whether students were meeting objectives? Again, it's good to make those milestones along the way, but I'm a believer in adjust as you go on with the kids because I can make, hey, in 2 weeks I want these kids to be able to do this. In 2 weeks I want the kids to be able to do this versus at the end of semester I want the kids to do this. So what we're going to do the week before the end of semester and go backwards. I don't know. Maybe I'm saying the same thing and maybe I do believe in it, but I just don't like the view of backwards mapping. Developing and understanding the content and attaining expected skills. Again, it's all about repetition for these kids. The planning process should be a lot of repetition within that lesson plan, within that unit plan. It's not about how many times can you quiz a week, how many times can you quiz every other week to show, because sometimes testing is not the way. Quizzing along the way is not the way formally. Um, I feel that you do bell ringers, you do small activities, you do labs, you have discussions where the kids can prove themselves versus um, I'm gonna teach you something today, quiz tomorrow. Teach you something the next day, quiz the next day. Again, those are things that we've done, and in our school is proven that it didn't work as well as they wanted to work. Again, the previous years we did it a different way. We had great results. This past year, terrible results. Um, Predict the student engagement skill attained in your plan and assessing student understanding. Again, when it comes to lesson planning, you always want to plan for plan for good activities where the students can get engaged, can be involved. To me, that's the best way to learn. I've said in the previous assignment that I turned in, I do believe that all students are all three learning styles, or at least two of the three. I don't think it's one. Because if you're auditory, then I should give you some headphones with a lesson on it with no visual and tell you to learn that way. Or if you're kinesthetic, give you something to do it and never show you visually. I think we're at least two of the three or all three. And building assessments, activities, labs, assignments where students can work together, work individually to reach that goal, reach that mastery is the best way when it comes to at least physics. Doing it hands on, doing the math, building something, that is what's going to help these kids learn and understand versus me speaking or kids looking at computer and just researching or things like that. Um, I don't know. That's my thoughts and that's my views, and I hope this works out. And thank you.